Welcome to EdSource's latest roundtable. My name is Ann Vasquez, the CEO of EdSource. Time and again, research has shown that arts education has the ability to transform learning, including helping boost test scores and bolstering social emotional skills. But the reality is that only a fraction of California schools offer a comprehensive arts education. The new statewide initiative, known as Prop 28, will set aside roughly $1 billion a year for arts education in California's public K through 12 schools. Our roundtable today will look more closely at what's at stake and what's happening behind the scenes as schools begin to implement Prop 28. Now for our introductions. First, I'd like to welcome to our panel Matt Garcia Ramirez, a first-generation college student who is in his second year at the University of California, Irvine, where he is studying social policy and public service with an emphasis on education. Please also welcome Austin Buettner, the former superintendent of Los Angeles Unified and also a philanthropist who spearheaded Proposition 28. Next, I'd like to introduce Melissa Shriver, who is the Strategic Philanthropy and Arts Education Advocacy Advisor for architect Frank Gehry, with whom she co-founded the organization Turnaround Arts, California. She currently serves as the organization's board chair. I'd also like to give a special welcome to Jessica Mealy, who is currently the interim executive director at Create California and founder of her own consulting practice. She is also a writer, educator, and grant maker. Please also welcome Letty Krause, who is the director of the California County Superintendent Statewide Arts Initiative, which works with 58 county offices of education. Also joining us today will be Marcos Hernandez, who is the principal at International Studies Learning Center at Legacy High School in Los Angeles Unified. Our moderator today is EdSource reporter Karen D'Souza. Karen, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. I feel really honored to be part of this discussion today. I want to thank everyone for being here. It's a huge topic, the power of the arts. And I'd like to hone in first to Matt. Matt, you wrote a fantastic commentary for us about how the arts have changed your life. And I'd like to start off with you today and sort of put the spotlight on the student voice. So why are the arts important to you? And how did exposure to the arts in school change your life?
Yeah, so I believe the arts have helped me find my voice. In middle school, I only had an art class that was like 30 minutes once a week during my regular class schedule. And I fell in love with arts in those moments. And the first decision I made was going to high school that provided arts education. So that was kind of the first time I like used my voice. I was like, Mom, please enroll me here. But then COVID hit, and COVID was a very difficult time, especially for artists, the performing artist. And during that time, I lost two grandparents in the span of 1 week, which was a real doozy because my grandparents meant so much to me. And I kind of fell into like a depression that I just could not get out of. I did have a support system, but we were in a global pandemic, so it was a little bit hard to reach out to folks until the California State Summer School for the Arts came to present for my school virtually, and they were talking about the program that they offered. That it was a intense arts program that was going to happen at CalArts, and that just got me really excited about the arts. I want to share this. I made like a checklist that day with everything, all the deadlines I needed to hit, because I was just so inspired by the program and really wanted to be a part of it. And I got in, and I remember taking advantage of the entire program. And my instructor, Hillary Darling, told me something that I still remember to this day. She said, you can learn all the fancy words you need for poetry, but what you have is something special. It's your voice. Your voice comes through in your writing. At the end of the program, I was chosen out of my cohort to get a scholarship for college. Before I had entered this program, I was not even thinking about going to college, and it just was not on my mind. But through the self-confidence that I gained throughout the program and honing in on my voice, I started to realize that higher education was something I did want to pursue. And I think that to the arts and to my art instructors, especially at the California State Summer School for the Arts, that really inspired me and pushed me to reach higher ed. And now I'm in my second year at the University of California, Irvine. So that's a little bit about my story.
That's a wonderful success story. And I think really perfectly illustrates the power of the arts in terms of a restorative practice that can be healing. I wonder what everyone else thinks about that. I mean, coming out of the pandemic, is arts education more important now than ever? And can it really help so many students who are still struggling, from everything from learning loss to coping with actual tragedies that came out of the pandemic.
I think when you look at our current state of chronic absenteeism having increased by 30% since 2018, and the reason that some students come to school being the arts, there's actually research that correlates that. Students are more likely to come to school when they have arts experiences there for them to engage in. And also the whole point that Matt made about his voice, and that the arts provide this critical avenue of student voice and ways to process their experience and desires and hopes and dreams in a unique way that no other content area does.
Thank you, Letty, for having the courage to follow a student voice. One thing I learned in working in schools is, drop the mic and move on after you hear from someone like Matt. But I think if you broaden the aperture, widen it just a bit, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences published in the fall of 2021 a piece called Art for Life's Sake. And it really pulls together research from the mental health side, from the academic side, from the sense of belonging, from the giving young adults, small children voice, and everything that the arts we know can do. And I really would encourage anyone who's got their doubts or doesn't quite understand just how center of the plate the arts are for young adults, for children, not just as part of a good education, but in making whole people part of society, give that report a read, because it's all there. And certainly in terms of me and the desire to pursue something like this was grounded not in my own story, but in understanding just how important the arts are. They're the glue that hold a good education together.
Now, given that I think there has been, decades of research, why isn't that better known in popular culture? That, part of the key to student engagement and family engagement often is the arts or sports, these sort of community events that draw everyone into the school. I'm wondering why there hasn't been a higher profile for that until now. Marcos, I see you itching to, oh no, and Melissa, both of you, one of you jump.
I was just going to add that James Catterall, who was an incredible professor at UCLA for many years and did a lot of important research on the impacts of arts education, he used to say that people talk a lot about STEM, and a lot of people don't even understand what engineering really is. The E in STEM just is applied math. And he would say, I wish people would start talking about arts education as applied creativity, because when you look at it as applied creativity and you look at the neuroscience around learning and emotions in the brain, you understand that there are much broader implications around how people learn, how emotion is a key element in terms of prepping your brain to be able to learn. And that applied creativity is important in aerospace. It's important in any endeavor. And that, I think, is also why arts integration is a really important teaching methodology, because then you're teaching math, you're teaching history, you're teaching any subject from this lens of applied creativity. Applying creativity, it's like a 21st century learning skill. It's so necessary. And I just think that a lot of people think in an old-fashioned way about arts education. It's a child with a crayon or a paintbrush, or what if my child doesn't want to be a musician? It's much broader and more impactful than that, I think.
Absolutely. And that sort of brings me to the equity piece of the pie. I mean, until now, really only a certain class of kids who had access to arts education. And this kind of tremendous opportunity to equalize that. But I wonder, I mean, do we feel that there's enough equity in the way Prop 28 is rolling out so far in the implementation? And in terms of the money, now the schools develop plans for Prop 28, but the districts funnel the money. Do we feel like things are kind of equitable in that situation, or should we pay more attention to it?
I'll go first, but certainly Marcos or others at a school site might have a further perspective. We wrote it to make sure that twice as much money goes to kids from families who are struggling to get by living in a low-income community. Because we knew going in, barely 1 in 5 kids were in a public school with a full-time arts or music teacher. And you could find where those 1 in 5 are. Just look for high income neighborhoods around California. Those were the 1 in 5. So we doubled down in making sure the resources were there for schools throughout the state, in particular, those that needed it the most. But unfortunately, so far, I'd say the implementation is C minus, and for a very simple reason. We wrote the initiative to supplement, not supplant, existing arts funding. And let me just read some words from the state legislative analyst's analysis of Prop 28, because it's plain language. It says Prop 28 requires funding be used primarily to hire new art staff and requires schools to certify that these funds were spent in addition to existing funding for arts education programs. Now, I'm sure everybody who's participating in this webinar today can understand that. That's plain language. More means more. But the greatest challenge I think we're seeing early on in implementation is some school districts either don't wish to recognize the plain language of the law or are willfully violating the law, and they're using money to backfill for existing programs. So they're zeroing out existing programs or making some other claim about the existing programs. And instead of one existing teacher plus another teacher, meaning two teachers, we're getting 1 minus 1 plus 1, so we're back to 1. And I'd say that's the greatest challenge in early implementation. And for those who somehow think that the school districts have a plausible argument, they don't. There's actually a body of work at the state level in interpreting both law and amendments to law written by voters, which is what this is. It's a new law, right? And that law says, by the California Supreme Court, has said we have long recognized that the language used in the statute should be given its ordinary meaning. Real simple. More means more. Supplement means add. The initiative itself says adding teachers, adding programs. But I think if we have the first challenge is to make sure schools are using the money properly, and many are not. And that's a great concern to me. I think it is probably on everyone in this panel. And we'll have to make sure the state's doing its part to make sure this law is properly implemented.
Now, do we think any of that is sort of interpretive or a certain amount of confusion? I know some people early on were concerned in terms of supplementing over a baseline, and there were disagreements over how the baseline should be calculated.
Yeah, no, I think it's mostly the wish being the father of the thought, or plain language not being plain enough. The law does not create any exception for what the prior funding was, meaning the prior funding could have been federal, state, local, private, could have been ongoing or one time. The law makes no exception. So if you spent $100,000 at a school in calendar or school year 22-23, the law requires you to spend $100,000 in 23-24 before you access your Prop 28 funds. There's no exception whether the money's ongoing, whether it's public, private, PTO, PTA, ESSER money that's going away. The law is very clear. You have an obligation as a school and a school district to maintain your level of funding before you can access this extra funding. Because voters overwhelmingly, 7 million people voted yes on this. There were no arguments submitted in opposition. That's never happened before in a ballot initiative for more funding in schools, about $1 billion a year. They didn't vote for $1 billion a year minus what's being spent, or maybe a couple $100 million new. They voted for an additional $1 billion. And so it's not a question of interpretation. I frankly think it's just a willful violation of the law by some school districts in hopes that nobody will catch them. Well, we hope the state's up to its game and we'll catch them and hold those who are not properly implementing the law accountable, because it's kids ultimately who suffer.
Let me follow on that train of thought, because I do think it's an important one to continue to tease out. What mechanisms do you feel are in place at the state level to ensure that the vetting process, which you just described, that there must have been a certain amount spent in this current year before you can access these funds?
Sure. Well, it's a good question, Ann. This source of school funding is no different than any other bit of money spent by the state of California. It's subject to audit by the state auditor. This happens to be education funding, so it also falls within the province of the California Department of Education to oversee its proper implementation. I think that's two places to start. So far, CDE has been relatively circumspect on this. Let's just put it mildly. They need to be a little more forceful. Supplement means supplement, not supplant. And it'd be nice to see the state auditor raise their game and get involved here, because this is the first full year. and it's going to set a precedent. If school districts are allowed to willfully and just flat out violate the law, well, what's going to happen next year and the year after? So it's the time for the state auditor to jump in with both feet now. And there's some very simple questions. Show us your baseline in 22, 23, and certify to us that you're adding, not supplanting. That's the first question. And the second is a really simple one. If you're using Prop 28 funds, tell us how many teachers, how many single subject arts and music teachers your school district had or your schools had in 22, 23, and how many they have for 23, 24. Because if you're spending Prop 28 money and you haven't increased the number of teachers, well, you got to be there. It is. You're supplanting because you're using the new money somehow to pay for existing programs.
Austin, I want to just jump in with a quick question. I wonder to what extent I've heard from some schools and some teachers that part of what is happening in terms of delaying the spending of the money is confusion, that they do feel like the CDE hasn't presented enough guidance, and the guidance that has been presented is sometimes confusing, and people are hesitant to be caught, audited later that they used the money the wrong way when they really actually weren't sure what the proper usage was. One of the things I've heard is in terms of sharing resources. If you have a smaller school and not enough money to fund a full-time arts teacher and you want to share that teacher, I think there's some confusion on how to do that properly and not be cheating. Wonder if anyone else has a sense of that. Letty, maybe you?
Well, the thing about that is, yes, that's true. And there are FAQs that sort of contradict one another. If you look at FAQ 19 and 20, one says schools can pool resources and share staff, and the other says you can't reallocate funds to sites. So I can see how it would be confusing. I can see how right there that's confusing. But of course, I'm not a school fiscal person, so I can't speak to that. But I would also say that there are some shenanigans happening more than that it is concerning. I share Mr. Buettner's concern. And there are also hesitant districts who are just not they don't know what to do, honestly. Then there is the teacher shortage, which I know we're going to get to.
But Karen, you raised two things and sort of conflated them a little bit. One is there are delays, and that's the law allowed time for schools to build programs. So while I wish every school would have implemented a program already because the kids are there, they're waiting. There are more maths in schools waiting for that arts and music teacher to show up. They have the right to wait a little bit. Okay, that's different than misspending the money from the jump. So two different things.
Indeed, I meant people waiting not because they didn't know what they wanted to do, but because they are unsure how to properly pursue that path.
Right.
Largely in terms of needing more leadership. It is a new, huge, epic program, and I think there are questions.
No, and I think it would be helpful to have CDE lean in a little bit further. So, for instance, I've spoken publicly. The law is clear. You can share between schools. And by the way, you could share with schools that are not even in the same school district. That's kind of going to be mind-blowing for some folks. But imagine a small rural elementary that happens to be just across the county line from another rural elementary. Well, they should share and it makes sense. They're going to create the best program, pooling resources. So on that particular very narrow issue, schools can and should share if it makes sense for their students. They know what their allocation is. And my hope we're going to see some creative thinking because small schools, in particular in remote areas, are going to have to share to most benefit their students.
Jessica, I wonder, while we're on this topic, since you deal with so many arts organizations and advocates, what are some other areas of confusion people have in terms of how best to implement?
Well, I think the attention to existing inequities in arts education and the drafting of the proposition was really helpful in the weighted student formula. I think one thing that we're seeing is that districts that have already invested in the arts have the internal capacity to make thoughtful decisions about how to build an arts education program. They have art teachers already, or they have a visual and performing arts department, some of them. And so they're able to leverage these funds and run with them in a way that is supporting the academic goals and the culturally responsive learning of the young people in their schools. I think the districts and the schools that have, for very and in many cases legitimate reasons, in some cases maybe not, but disinvested in the arts over the years don't have that expertise in house, and they need help, and they're struggling to know what kind of decisions to make when it comes to building an arts education program from scratch. And that's where we see some inequities. And that's why it's really important for parents and advocates to ask their principal, because these decisions are being made at the school level. Ask their principal how they're spending their Prop 28 funds. Ask to see their plan, their expense plan. And Create California has some tools for advocates on our website, and we'll provide the link through this webinar. But that's a really critical thing, is talking to principals and starting the conversation, because districts and schools are starting in really different places based on their history in the arts over the last 20 or 30 years.
Can I just give an
I was going to say, Marcos, you may wish to add, just picking up on Jessica's point, we built this with Agency for School Communities. This is really meant to be the voice of the community. So families have agency, teachers have agency, principals have agency. And I know that's one of the things that Marcos speaks a lot about, you may wish to add. But to pick up on Jessica's point, because we need to help families understand this is there for them to weigh in and be part of.
Absolutely. So, as a teacher and me, I want to make some connections here. So we always have to go back to the roots, right? And the roots are what Matt was saying is we have the funding to do great things, but we all have to be committed and we have to listen to the students. Melissa was talking earlier about, really understanding like the power of the arts. And I had more of a traditional education where it was seen as something extra. And it wasn't until I met an amazing third grader, Michelle. We were at a student study team, and all of us were supposed to add like all the amazing things that she was good at. And everyone was quiet, like for a good 3 minutes. We're like, okay, what are her strengths, guys? Come on. What are her strengths? And then suddenly, someone who was doing art said she knows how to command a stage. And looking at that from her perspective, looking at that student, really helped me as a school leader to look at paying attention, because that's not what school leaders are being asked across the country. I met with many principals where, we're all being asked about our reading scores or math scores. We're not really looking at the arts implementation. But having said that, we also have to recognize that we need amazing teachers in our systems, such as Elida. Some of you met this amazing art teacher at our school that knows how to put it all together for her students. We built an orchestra that you can follow from elementary to middle school, have an amazing music program. And the two more things that I want to add is many school leaders, I include myself in that, may not have the experience and the imagination and background in art. So we need to rely on strong partners such as, Turnaround Arts to build that capacity within us as leaders and say, we know how to build a strong math program, because there's so much professional development, so much support, so much pressure, but we don't really know how to build a strong arts program. And that's where the partners come in. And then going back to what Austin was saying, I think the part is, yes, we have the money, but we have to build the need. We have to create the need. We all have to advocate, promote the arts. And that's where the families come in. Families want more arts. And then I forgot who shared the statistic about 30%, 35% of our kids, and my daughter's included in that, they do not want to be in school with the typical traditional that we have there. That's why we have this chronic absenteeism. So we have an opportunity here to really broaden what it means to be a successful student in a school and have all these other opportunities. And we know that we were going to have some of these challenges, but again, it's not, we open the door, right? Financially, now we got to push our students or families through the door so that, we can have this amazing arts program over the next decade.
Melissa, is that a role arts partners could play helping people who are really starting from scratch? How do you build a program?
I do think so. I think Create California with the toolkit is doing a great job. I think people need help with like an arts strategic plan. For instance, when we go into a school, we ask them, we don't just hand them a plan. This is all collaborative work. A school might have chronic absenteeism. They might have a disproportionate amount of English language learners that they'd like some help boosting literacy rates with. They could have any host of issues, disciplinary infractions. And so what you really want to do is build that arts strategic plan to address the issues, help make that principal and those teachers and those students feel successful. And the arts are the tool that's the toolkit you're using. It's a leadership tool for the teachers, collaboration. But I do think if you're like what Jessica referred to, some of these districts are coming in, they've already been implementing, so they kind of are getting a head start. And so for schools that don't have that or have disinvested over the last few years, I think it's really important for them to reach out to some local nonprofit partners who can help them kind of get that off the ground.
I just want to thank you, Melissa. I just want to call out that I'm seeing a lot of questions in the Q&A that are specific, like, can we use this much money for this? And we had this much money and now we want to do this. And I want to honor that and recognize that and apologize that we cannot give you guidance and advice on that. This is where the CDE has been really clear that LEAs need to consult their own legal counsel on that. And I wish that I had a more helpful answer for you. I can answer some of the questions that have come up around, can this money be used for after school? And the answer is no. And I also saw a question about
No, Jessica, sorry to interrupt. I'm happy to answer some of them since I helped write the law. And the money can be used for after school programs.
Can you say a little bit about how?
Sure. As long as it's aligned with state standards, it does not have to be for credit. It could be used during the traditional school day or for after school programs. It could be even used as part of a summer school program. So we wrote it flexibly because ideally, arts and music, the center of the plate, is part of the academic day, I believe. But for certain types, in particular, as you get into secondary, we have complex block scheduling and other things. The ability to replace in order to add gets very, very complicated. So we wrote in flexibility with a preference, but schools would be allowed to go after school. So, and as far as some of the other specific questions, I know this forum is not necessarily intended to go after or respond to each of them, but if Karen, you think any of the particular questions are worth throwing out.
Absolutely. I think Anne has one right now.
I actually have one. I think there's been a lot of questions about the 80-20 rule. So I think we should talk about what that is. There's a question about the teacher pipeline, and that it is already difficult to find teachers as it is. So, how is there flexibility with the 80-20 rule?
Sure. Again, I'll start and others can, again, since I wrote it, I guess I probably should start. The idea behind the 80-20 was fairly simple. Two things. The first is we believe the core of an ongoing program at school in the arts should be teacher-led instruction. A teacher who lives and breathes the program helps not just for 1 year, but 5, 10, 15 years build extraordinary programs. That's meant to be the core. That's the 80%, if you will. The waiver was written with a couple of respects, primarily because in order to find that right classroom educator, people like Marcos have to take their time. They have to vet it with their community. They have to figure out the program they want. And so the idea was give schools time to find the right leader, give schools time to balance a program. Let's say Marcos wanted to start an animation program at Legacy. They already have one, I don't know. So the first year you might have to spend money on machines and tools and computer software, and that might be more than 20% of the cost. But the next year, 90% would be spent on your staff. So maybe you start the program in January, second semester. So first year you get a waiver and you explain to CDE, we need the waiver because we're going to buy these machines and this software. We're going to train our teachers and our staff how to use it. And once the program's up and going, we expect to spend about 90% of the money on our staff and 10% for replacing broken items and further training and things like that. So I think that's the intent of the waiver. The waiver is not to say on a wholesale basis forever you shouldn't have classroom or teacher-led instruction in the classroom. That's not what the law is intended to do. There's a separate issue, Ann, you raise, and happy for all of us to weigh in, which is how do we create a pipeline of arts educators? The two are separable, okay? And I think we can all agree there's a teacher shortage at almost all levels, in particular for specialty skills. And traditional credentialing may not get us all the way where we need to be. So we need to look at things like CTE, and the governor's proposed in his budget for this year and directed the CTC to expand, update how a CTE program can work, not just in secondary, but in elementary, for instance, as one of those things. So 80/20 and pipeline are very much separable issues. Let's not conflate the two. But I think this group would have a lot to add on the issue of teacher pipeline and where do you want to be in 2, 5, 8 years as opposed to where you want to be this week. But clearly we're going to have to bring in a new generation of talent and fish in deeper, bigger waters than we currently do for single subject arts teachers.
Absolutely. I definitely want us to have a discussion about alternate pathways, but I feel like while we mentioned the waiver, let's circle back really quickly. I think there's been a lot of questions around like what is good cause and how do you prove good cause and how much flexibility is there? And I think I've heard some people say if you can't find someone, staff, arts teachers for that 80%, that's what would allow you to qualify for the waiver. And then you could use the money in any number of different ways. And I'm not sure that that's true. And I wonder what Letty and Jessica, what do you guys know more about the waiver than you did originally? I know CDE has surfaced some more data recently.
Yeah. Before that, though, I want to quickly say that our arts framework adopted by the State Board of Education has all the information on building effective arts programs, including strategic planning. And so let's not forget about our state adopted resources. The waiver was outlined, the process was outlined last week at CDE's webinar, and it will be by application through a portal. And the elements of it include a problem statement around why the waiver is needed, a narrative proposal about how that is going to be addressed, and then a desired measurable outcome. So that is what was shared with us last week. That webinar has not been posted yet, but I have screenshotted the slides, if that's a word. It's not, but that's what I did. And also important to know that it's going to be an iterative process. So if you submit a waiver, it could be denied and you could resubmit. So as far as the timeline about how quickly all of that goes along, I don't know. And then I would also wonder what the criteria is. I mean, we understand the basic 80/20 and the reason behind both, but I'm wondering from CDE's end what the criteria will be for actually going through and approving or not approving those waivers and how quickly that will happen.
So is this an area where we think CDE might want to step up a little in terms of guidance? The money has already landed in the schools. And if people aren't really sure, what qualifies for a waiver, what is good cause, that seems like an area that could be fleshed out more. Austin, do you have any sense of that?
Again, just to follow Letty's comment, I think the waivers are a piece, but I don't think they're center of the plate. If your first reflex as a school community or as a school district or a teacher leader, principal leader is to say, we need a waiver because we don't like the rules, you're starting in the wrong place. Your first reflex ought to be to say, what kind of program do you want to build? And where we're going to find the talent to lead the program. And then you're setting yourself up for a really thoughtful conversation with CD to say, okay, it's a talent issue and here's how we're solving it. Or it's a training issue or it's a tools issue and therefore that's why we need a waiver. It's not to say, well, we don't like the rules, so we're just going to do something entirely different. Or we don't think we can find somebody, so we want a waiver. I saw in the Q&A, we'd like to use a waiver to actually just pay for an existing program. That's not what the law's for. So I think the waivers are important. but not center the plate. And I think my hope is school communities are starting with the program they want, the type of leadership they want, what they think it's going to do for kids in their community. And then I think the waivers will be granted if you're true to all of those first principles.
Well, I think you're right. The staffing shortage definitely may be a center of the plate for all of American education right now. I mean, not just the arts, right? But there are a lot of alternative pathways, and I would love a discussion of some of those between you guys. I mean, for instance, there's the proposed expansion of the CTE credential, career technical education. There are some new undergraduate credentials, in the works. And then, of course, there's the traditional pipeline itself, the arts teacher credential pipeline, which has shrunk over decades because these jobs have not existed. So it makes sense that people wouldn't want to be trained for them. How long do we think that process will take to ramp up so that there might be actually enough arts teachers? And what do we think of the alternatives in the meantime? And pardon my cat making a special guest appearance.
I'll share that locally here, our County Office of Education is working to establish a credentialing program to meet this need. They've assessed this region and how many they will need, and they are working on a Grow Your Own program. I also know that our local state university is doing the same. And what's really nice about this is they're doing it together or simultaneously in conversation with one another. So one thing I think that could be harmful is when there's competition. We know that there are many needs. There are people that need to access different institutions to be credentialed. And so I really appreciate this local effort. And then also I think that CTC really has to get in here and fast track some of these credential programs that are trying to get their programs authorized. Now that's not the alternative pathway question piece being addressed, but that's some of what I'm seeing happen here with your traditional credentialing programs to widen access, not necessarily fast track it, but make more places where you can get this type of credentialing.
And is there room for both, like growing the traditional and sort of blazing new pathways, or do a lot of people feel like the traditional credentials are what are the gold standard, and that's what we should be aiming
I think we're going to need something else, but as a field, we have not really united on what that something else is. And that is a really challenging conversation in the field. I think there's a short-term issue. Like we need to get a lot more teachers in the door. In the past, when individual LEAs have hired up in the arts, those teachers have mostly come from out of state. And remember, we didn't even have dance and theater credentials in this state until 3 or 4 years ago. So those credentialing programs have only just started and are only just starting to turn out dance and theater teachers for, jobs that weren't a sure thing until Prop 28 passed and created demand. So that's going to take time. There are so-called emergency credential pathways. So the internship credential pathway, it does require the LEA to decide that they are going to hire an uncredentialed teacher and support them as they go through the process of enrolling in a credentialing program and then completing that credentialing program. And there are some LEAs in the state that have done that. And I also, along with Sacramento, want to lift up Cal State San Marcos, which is developing a Grow Your Own program, a pipeline from their undergraduate arts and humanities program into their teacher credentialing program, and then into their North San Diego County schools. So that's all like brand new stuff that's just started. We're learning a lot. And it's taking time, and we don't have time. So I think we're going to have to figure out, I am of the opinion, and it's not shared by everyone, that we need like everyone to come together and figure out, say yes to a whole bunch of options and see what works. And then we have this money in perpetuity to like really, really make it work in the way that is best for young people. So I don't want to do this under the fear that it's going to go away. It's not going to go away. It's a tremendously wonderful problem to have. So let's all get together and figure out how we can bring more teachers into this process.
That is such a wonderful point to make. I have to say, in the last week alone, 3 separate people who are deeply involved in the arts asked me about that. They said, you know what? They're just going to cut it. wait and see. There will be state budget troubles and they'll cut the arts again. And it was all I could do to convince them that no, I think it's stable. It's a proposition. Unless there's another proposition, I think we're good to go. But I think that it's interesting that it will take people time to catch up emotionally.
Karen, there's a lot of questions coming through about, can we talk a little bit about partnering with arts organizations to make the most of these funds and what's allowed, what's not? There was even a specific question about when considering the baseline, does that include the spending that a district might spend through community arts partners or organizations? And so if we can talk a little bit about those partnerships.
Austin and Melissa probably know.
Yeah, again, so I'll start with where you ended, Anne, and come back. Your baseline is what you were spending on arts education. So it might have been a collaboration with Turnaround Arts or PS Arts or a bunch of great program partners, and that's your baseline. So that's within your $100,000, if you will, for school year 22-23. So that's your maintenance, right? Going forward, one of the things that I think if we are all creative, there's a big role for community arts partners, not just in the 20%, if you will, the non-80%.
Now, that's an interesting point because I think that's been the assumption. People
think.
Yeah,
but think of how they might adapt and change their mark. Because let's assume, for putting aside the issue of how a teacher is properly in the classroom, whether they're classified, traditionally credentialed, or CTE, all those are valid. Okay, so let's put that aside for a moment. If you're a community arts partner, historically, you might have had all of your teachers, I'll use lowercase t, on your payroll. And you contract with the district, you have 5 teachers show up, they're well trained, they put on a great program for many schools, and everything else. Okay? Now, going forward, that same teacher, we need to help create a path for that teacher to be in the classroom, classified, traditionally credentialed, CT, whatever that might be. And their salary, then, they can become an employee of that school district, while being part of the community arts partners. So they're part of both. So the training, the curriculum, all of the wonderful secret sauce that a community arts partner might bring is additive. But we need community arts partners to be a little bit creative and say, okay, well, if we're going to grow and serve more schools, which we hope they will, our next generation or our increased employee base are going to have to find a way to be an employee at the school and help them. Classified, traditionally credentialed, CTE. So everyone's got to adapt to it, but there's an enormous role yet to play for community arts partners, building off of the important role they're already playing in schools. And back to where Anne ended, that's a part of your baseline. So this funding wouldn't supplant that great program, but there's an opportunity to add to it, expand it to serve more students, or add another program of a different community partner at the school district.
That's really helpful, Austin. I was also going to say, a lot of these arts nonprofit partners do different things. PS Arts, who you referenced, does tremendous work bringing teaching artists into schools. Our program, we're not really a direct services provider. What we do is we focus a lot on teacher PD. So, to your point about being flexible where the money is, those are things that are helpful because we're working strictly in elementary schools, so we've got classroom teachers who we are partnering with teaching artists and really training them to integrate the arts across the curriculum. So to your point, there's a lot of opportunity in the 80% as well.
Can I just go back to the pipeline thing? I just want to for a listener who, because everyone in this call for the most part is already down the rabbit hole on all the issues and the challenges of bringing talent to the school. Let me just add a little dimension first. If assuming the $1 billion is spent to supplement, not supplant, which is what the law says, that can translate to as many as 15,000 new jobs in schools, full and part-time. Okay? That are a greater number of arts educators than currently teach in California schools today, and is a greater number than will be hired in the rest of the country combined in the next few years. So the magnitude is ginormous, and along with it is the opportunity. And I think I'm where Jessica is, which is we need all of these pathways need to be grown, expanded. The traditional credentialing pipeline, of course, needs to be grown. But we need to recognize that only graduates around 600 or 700 folks a year today in the state of California. it's not realistic to assume that's going to grow to 6,000 anytime soon. We hope it grows, needs to be invested in. A lot of things that can be done at the state and local level to support that, right? There's the classified pathway. We haven't talked about it all. Um, Content mastery can come in the form of a classified individual who tomorrow, or close to tomorrow, could be somewhere at Legacy in one of Marcos's classrooms alongside a certificated teacher. So 1 and 1 is 5. That's
Would that tend to be a teaching artist?
Well, it would be a teaching artist of some sort, but they don't have to have a credential because they're going to be working alongside the credentialed classroom teacher. That's the pathway. And by
Why
the way,
is
the
there a
pathway,
tension between arts teachers and teaching artists? This is something Jessica told me a long time ago, and it took me a really long time to wrap my hand around that there were, different territories and both somewhat defended by practitioners. And I think that that's partially what's happening here is, people worried about their craft being eroded. If you are a credentialed arts teacher, you might not, really want people coming in via something like school gig for like a short-term teaching position. And I wondered if we could talk a little bit about that. Are there any tensions here between different kinds of arts practitioners, and how do we resolve them?
just clarify though, Karen, school gig is not for short term. School gig is to bring artists into the world of arts education, recognizing that they may go a classified pathway, a traditional credentialing pathway, or a CTE or some alternative pathway like a district internship or something like that. Uh, what school gig is meant to serve is a different need, which is historically schools and school districts have not been great recruiters of talent. There are 1,037 school districts in the state of California, which means there are at least 1,038 different ways to try to find a job. And so if one believes, as I do at least, that you need multiple pathways and that the pool that we should be fishing in is of people who practice the arts, who have content mastery, and we can bring down a pathway, we got to fish where the fish are, and that's what school gig is meant to do. But to bring them in to become part of a team at Marcos School or elsewhere for the long term. So maybe the gig part of school gig can confuse people. But how do you take teaching artists, I guess, in the vernacular, or practicing artists, and help them become arts educators? And that's the main event in all of it.
Yeah, I just want to add that, part of the as school leaders, we have to recruit and we have to get the word out. The school that I'm at now had a good arts program, visual arts, and they wanted to expand to a music program, and I can't get the credit. The previous principal talked to a musician, brought him in, got him into the program, so he's got all these instruments. He really enjoys working with her kids. And when I have my one-on-one meeting to get to know him and how I can support the program, I asked him why he hesitated to come on board earlier, and he said that there wasn't that stability. And I think that we need to communicate that as I'm dealing with the budgets, yes, all of you know that there are budget cuts in many areas. There was the amount of money that this school received last year for Prop 28 is the same amount that we're going to be using for next year. So there's that continuation. And I think that's, as we get that message out, that's what a lot of, artists are saying, that they didn't see it as a viable option. Now it's a viable option for them to commit to, spending the rest of their careers with their students.
That's really a miraculous state of affairs, isn't it? Like that there actually is stable funding for arts education in California. We shouldn't take it for granted. It is kind of an epic achievement all around.
I just want to add that I will say my mom was my first teaching artist. My mother is an early childhood educator and taught early childhood at the college level, but she's also a dancer and a storyteller. And so for me, education, learning, and creativity were intertwined from my earliest years. That was not the case when I went to school, and I went to a fine public school system in Massachusetts. It was fine. But it was not the kind of creative education I experienced at home. So I know that for those of you who don't know what a teaching artist is an artist who also has in parallel process and education practice. And for most teaching artists, those are both really strong for them, and they want to do both. And I do believe that teaching artists can be excellent classroom teachers, and also they need the proper training and support in order to make that transition. And so I think as a field, we need to have an understanding of like, what is that proper training and support. But there are many teaching artists who work in schools right now, either through organizations or as classified staff, who might be interested in transitioning into the teacher pathway, but it is complicated and it is expensive. And as someone who used to employ teaching artists at an arts education organization in San Francisco, shout out to Performing Arts Workshop, the life of a teaching artist is really unstable. And it's tricky to make ends meet. And so contemplating taking the time and the money and investing in a credentialing program takes some convincing and takes some support. And there are some great programs that are doing that. I think Cal State East Bay has a great program as well. And I'm not going to name all of them. There's some great programs that do that, but we need more information out there to teaching artists, and we need more support to people who could be incredible credentialed classroom teachers to encourage them and support them through the pipeline. And we need financial support to help them do it.
That could also be a great way to diversify that workforce. If you take away some of the financial burden of like pursuing a credential, a lot more people would be interested in doing it. I know that Meryl at Cal State San Marcos, that's one of her big issues. There should be equity in who has the opportunity to become a teacher. Letty, yes.
Yeah, I want to also highlight this idea that I know Sac County is exploring, and I know is being done in Fontana Unified, which is your students as your teachers you're grooming your students to be the teachers and to come back. So Fontana's Dance Collaborative is a pipeline for that, and they have students being encouraged very young and going through their dance programming and being seen as leaders and dance teachers. And so that is one effort that's been underway for many years to grow these teachers and keep them in their local area. So I think we need a lot more of that. And Prop 28 does bring that idea to those who are interested in the arts, that teaching is a viable career, and while also being the artist that you want to be professionally in doing both.
I wanted to jump in with yet another question from the audience, an equity question. How can California make sure that in the process of implementing Prop 28, we don't exacerbate existing inequities? You know, schools that already have good arts programs stand to be in better position to make use of this money. So how can we support those that do not?
I'm going to just say this is a big issue for the California county superintendents that I know. We have 58 counties, all very different. Many are rural, remote. They don't have a lot of ADA, but they still value the arts. And this is, they all recognize that Prop 28 they supported this measure, and they recognize it's a great opportunity, but it gets really tricky sometimes. Like I talked to someone today, they're getting $14,000. So we're talking about, well, what are you doing with that? And they're actually helping to pay for a piece of a teacher, but there's struggles all around in terms of the reporting requirements with CDE, the auditing, and this person's dedicated to the arts and is not letting that deter them. But it is an issue, and it's an issue in many, many counties. I don't have an answer though, Anne.
Anne, I have a suggestion for you and Karen. I think sharing good practice is a great way. All boats in the harbor rise when one can see what good looks like. And so I would. I don't know the resource of EdSource and what your inclination is, but I certainly would love to be part of something like this to follow on and just make it that topic. What is good practice? Because Letty's spoken to it, Jessica has. I know Melissa's aware. There are some school districts that are really leading the way and that are doing great things with their new and additional Prop 28 funds. And I think when we can elevate what good looks like, I think that's a good place to start so that school districts who don't have the resources available to them can just tune in to a webinar like this and say, oh, that, okay, or here's someone I could call and learn more about how they did it. But sharing the practice.
Now that's actually a great
source can do that.
That's a great bridge. One thing I wanted to do is, who do you think the stars are in the educational world? Everybody. Who would you point to? Either a school district or an arts partner who's really got it down. What are the gold standards out there?
Anyone that I would call out has been proactive with a strategic arts plan, whether it came through whatever organization it came through, or whether it was homegrown. Those are the places that are really shooting forward with this and early implementers. And these are the people that we meet with when we look for examples. And we've been doing this for a while. But that's kind of a key right there to being that shining star person or entity.
I'll just say, for those who don't know, every county office of education in the state has an arts lead, and Letty is in constant communication with them. And those arts leads are particularly important in rural counties where the schools and LEAs are spread far apart, or maybe there's no LEA. So the county arts leads are huge advocates and also resources for school administrators and art teachers, particularly in rural schools. I think there are, I want to say we know where the inequities are in arts education. I mean, the Creativity Challenge, the SRI report that came out in 2022 was really clear on this. I mean, they are schools with majority Black and brown kids, schools and rural schools in the state. And that has been the case. It was the case in 2007 when the first SRI report came out. It was the case then over 15 years later. I will say there are a number of places that are defying that expectation or the demographics. So Chula Vista in San Diego County, many of you have, in the arts education community, we know about it, but I think it's really important to lift it up for those of you who don't know Chula Vista. I think there are a number of, I lived in the Bay Area for a long time, and I will lift up San Francisco. It's its own like weird little place, but also it has its own public funding stream for arts education. And that started 20 years ago. So some of these efforts that started a long time ago are now kind of reaching fruition in a way that is really exciting. I know Fresno County and Tulare County have been in conversation with each other about doing some really incredible work in the Central Valley. So, and then I want to bring up Cal State San Marcos again and Cal State East Bay doing some really important work around teacher credentialing and grow your own programs.
I think I want to add to students, right? So if you're a student, ask for what you dream, what you aspire. We schools want to hear your voice. So talk to your principal, talk to school leaders, talk to the district, see what you want, what kind of education you want for yourself, for families. Be involved in your school, right? Show up. The school is going to offer you the level of arts education that you accept. So we have to demand more from those principals out there, right? In terms of what we want. And then in terms of principals, my advice is if you do not have a strong arts leadership team, that's a good place to start. It takes teamwork for us to make this work. So you take the strategic arts plan, don't read it in your closed office. Make sure that you have a strong team, experts, make families, make parents, people in the community part of that arts leadership team, and we will see success. We will rise together, as Austin said it.
As we're approaching the close of this tremendous hour, which I think can continue for another hour easily, I thought I'd hand the floor over to Matt and see if, since we started with you, what advice you might give fellow students.
I know this can sound very scary, all these terms that you might not know or you may not know, but at the end of the day, education is here for us, the students. It's here to serve us, and we have a voice at the table. So please use that voice because that is very important. Use the public comment at your school district's meetings. Ask your principal questions like, there is a seat for you at the table, and if there isn't, please make one for yourself. You have the right, and it's your responsibility as well as a student. So yeah, that's all I wanted to share.
That's a wonderful note on which to end this great hour. We've had a lot of questions from the audience, so I want to thank the audience for their thoughtful questions. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, we've been recording this event, so we will be sharing that in our newsletter tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. And I wanted to thank each and every one of our panelists for all of your time and your contributions to the conversation. I think Austin has set EdSource up for the challenge, and I think we're up for it to continue to spotlight solutions and those that are doing things right and doing it well, because at the end of the day, that's how we're able to really implement change and really affect change on a greater scale. And thanks again to the Hewlett Foundation for making today possible.